Hi, Jana. Thank you so much for coming on here today. I'm so happy to have you.
Hi, Anya. Thank you for having me.
Of course, it's an honor. So let's dive right in and tell us like what your upbringing looked like, what kind of trauma you had to go through, and how that childhood led you to the career you are having now.
Sure. Okay. Well, I grew up in the South, and there's a test that clinicians give clients, and it's called the ACE test, Adverse Childhood Experiences. And there's 10 questions, and I answer yes to all 10 questions. So socioeconomic level, really low. We were on welfare, poor, food stamps, a lot of stigma and labels put on me based on that. Living in a small town too, everybody knows your business, right? But my parents were interesting. They had known each other since they were kids. My mom had lost her dad at 12, and my father kind of picked up the pieces and was her best friend and there for her. So they were very enmeshed. They fell in love as teenagers, and then they married at 19, had my brother, and then had me at 22. Parenting doesn't come with a handbook, so they did the best they could, I'm sure. They didn't do a great job, though. Dad turned to alcohol, just like his father, who had immigrated from Ireland, and really started to repeat the same patterns that was in his family. So my dad's mother was Cherokee Indian, and she would abuse his father. She was a big woman. It was kind of the opposite, right? But he had lost his legs, my granddad. So the conditioning my dad received, he just continued it with my mother. So my mom suffered a lot of physical abuse, but mom had been diagnosed as a teenager with, back then it was called manic depressive, so bipolar. And losing her father the way that she did, she kind of internalized it was her fault. He had a massive heart attack at like 57, and she had promised to make him a sandwich. And I talk about it in my book because in the book, I'm really wanting to show people how our parents were conditioned, how these, intergenerational trauma gets passed down, right? And yeah, so my childhood, by the time, I was 4, I found my dad trying to suffocate my mom with a pillow and kill her. And, I interrupted that pattern. He was kind of like in a trance state when it happened. And then by the time I was 8, my mom put a shotgun to my head and my brother's head. She was in a blackout. She was taking Valium, and she was in and out of mental institutions. So there was a lot of chaos. Again, as I said, adverse childhood trauma or experiences, I scored 10 out of 10. So there was a lot going on. The gift in that, though, Anya, was I developed a very deep relationship with spirit. And when I say spirit, of course, it was beyond my senses, but I would pray like I saw people doing in church. Growing up in the Bible Belt in the US is very Baptist. So we were either at the Baptist church or at one of those holy roller Pentecostal churches where, they're talking in tongues. And that's the church where I would feel the Holy Spirit. And I had an experience really young, around 7, where I passed out. I was so overcome with ecstasy, like it's kind of like Rumi, when he started doing all the whirling and, over 6,000 poems he uttered of just ecstasy with the divine. So as a child, the trauma was pushing me to find some inner resource, right? Because when we go through trauma, we need something, a safety line, right? And I didn't really have one. My grandmother was, but she wasn't always there. So the gift in my trauma, I always look back at my childhood and writing the book, and I would say I wouldn't change anything, because to me, there's nothing more important than a relationship with spirit.
That is really beautiful. And I mean, that's so interesting that you're saying you wouldn't want to change anything. That really shows how you've healed and kind of, broke that generational trauma,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I call myself a cycle breaker.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was, the experience. So I would find my mom, she would take razor blades and slice her wrist.
Oh
She
my.
would never do it deep enough, right? Because she was just a cry for help. But as a child, the first time I can remember, I'm probably second grade when I found her. And I wrapped her wrist up and called my aunt. And I would tell her, when I grow up, Mommy, I'll take care of you.
Hmm.
So I feel like my soul was deeply connected to my mother. And, as I believe that we're all, souls, and we have these contracts we make with one another. And I was there for her even in her last, days, even though, you know, we're complicated. Humans are complicated, right? We're like, my mom wasn't all bad. I mean, there was goodness there. She taught me how to love. She taught me how to be present. She taught me meditation. She came out of the hospital, Anya, when I was in third grade, and she had a big album, a 33 vinyl. She put it on the record player, and she said, we're going to meditate. And, I didn't know what we were doing. I just wanted to be with my mommy. So I would sit there, and these experiences, now I look back and I realize my mom's mental illness and all her experiences in electroconvulsive therapy, when she would go in these hospitals, they rewire your brain with electro. She would come home in a higher state of consciousness. Now, she couldn't sustain it because her environment didn't support it, right? It's like an addict going into rehab and they come back, and you've got to change your environment in order for that to continue to have success and stay off whatever addiction it is. Well, my mom, she would eventually fall back, but I was an impressionable little sponge. So, I mean, I'm 8, 9 years old, and she's reading near-death experience books, and Raymond Moody and Edgar Cayce, the Sleeping Prophet, and astrology. I'm learning, not just, I'm going to church, and learning about the Bible and Christianity, but I'm also learning esoteric, occult, deep spirituality, mysticism. And I think it made me the teacher I am today, right? So I
Yeah.
didn't change any of it.
Definitely. And I just had to think, it's so interesting because I know you worked with, for example, Joe Dispenza, who's all about rewiring your brain, but you already experienced that and you saw that with your mom. So that already led you on your path, right?
And I didn't know, of course, when I was little. When I was working at the Chopra Center in Carlsbad, Dr. Simon, Deepak's partner, is a neurologist. And I was in my 40s, early 40s, and I still had, when you share a story that you haven't healed, talking about Joe Dispenza, he says, memory without emotional charge is wisdom.
Mm.
Well, I still had emotional charge when I would recall the memory of my family members and people talking about, like, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Oh yeah, Jana's mom, Janice, she's crazy. She's had electroshock treatment and she's done all these things. And so here I am in my early 40s, and I'm recounting the story of my childhood to him. I'm crying, and he's just listening very empathically. And he says, when I finish, he said, Jana, what are your tears saying about this? Like, what do you make it mean that your mom had electroconvulsive therapy? And I was like, what do you mean? She was crazy. And he said, no, honey. He said, actually, they still use that. He said, that's the way we rewire a patient's brain. He's like, it's positive. It's not negative. He's like, they were trying to support her, but her environment, that was the first time anyone had told me that.
Wow. In your 40s. Wow.
In my 40s. And then all of a sudden it healed because I was able to perceive it differently. Oh, mom wasn't some crazy person that had, shock treatment and the thing in her mouth, like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It was actually supporting her. And maybe, we don't know, right? I could view it from the lens of that my mom's soul and my soul had a contract.
Mm.
And a part of that contract was to heal all these generations of chaos, because her grandfather was a child abuser, a molester. He was, like, how do you heal these really toxic, sick things in families of origin if one person doesn't just wake up and say, I'm not going to repeat that, right? Like, this all happened for a reason. So I began, whether or not I know it's true or not, it doesn't matter. It empowers me to look at my childhood and my mother's illness through the lens of, it was the greatest gift ever, because I took responsibility at a young age, right? In my early 20s, to say, I'm going to break the cycle. I know somebody out there has the knowledge on how to break codependency, how to have healthy, functioning relationships, and I'm going to find them. So I spent my 20s and 30s doing all this work. And at 40, I launched Emotional Healing Systems and the retreat businesses and everything I do now.
So can you share, besides Joe Dispenza, you work with like Deepak Chopra, Debbie Ford, like some of the biggest lessons or teachings you learned from them?
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, I would say, well, Deepak's been my longest teacher. So that was the first in the late 80s. When I first read one of his books, I made a goal. I'm going to go see him live as much as possible when I can. And then to eventually, train with him and become a meditation teacher. And Debbie Ford, I didn't meet until a little later, in my mid-30s, but her work was all about shadow work. And she really simplified Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist's work, and she deduced it down to 4 steps to help people really understand how we live in the mirror of relationship. Everybody's mirroring us back to ourselves. But if we don't have that knowledge, right, we're ignorant to it because no one's taught us this stuff. It's really emotional intelligence. And as you know, it's not taught in schools. So, the things that I've learned from them, Debbie, the greatest lesson I learned from Debbie Ford is you don't care what people think about you. I bet a lot of your listeners are like, oh, yes, I do. I'm always thinking, oh, what do they think? You only care what people think if you agree with them. And here's how you know it's true. Ask yourself, when was the last time someone paid you a compliment or told you how amazing you were, and you deflected it, you resisted it, you didn't accept it?
Interesting.
Be like, oh yeah, thank you. Right? You don't care what they think because you didn't agree with them.
Yeah.
Now, if they judge you and tell you you believe it, then you care what they think, right? Because you agree with them. So that was probably the greatest lesson. And with Deepak, gosh, there's been so many. But, one thing that just pops in my head is when I heard him say time and time again that if he, say, had been given a diagnosis of cancer, you've got, 6 months to live. And here's the path to maybe getting better or maybe having the cancer go into remission. You can choose chemo, you can choose this, you can choose that. He would always say, I would choose meditation.
So that brings me to my next question. So if some of the listeners are out there and they are ready to heal right now, so would meditation be that one tool that you recommend to get started on the healing journey?
Absolutely. And the reason why is because consciousness is everything. And when we say the word consciousness, all we are is saying awareness. If you're not aware of where your mind, which produces 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day, is, then I call it stinking thinking. It starts to control you. It masters you and you become a slave to your mind. You can't master your mind. So until you can master where your attention is, which is your most valuable asset, then you have free will. Then you can start to move it. So the meditation practice, a lot of people are like, oh, I've tried to meditate. I can't, my mind's too busy. Well, the point of the practice isn't to quiet the mind. It's actually to be aware of when you're lost so you can keep bringing it back. If you do that enough, eventually the mind, it's like an unruly kid on a road trip, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Eventually the mind starts to settle down and the child goes to sleep, right? And they stop asking. Same thing happens to us. We don't go to sleep. We just go into spaciousness, into silence. If we don't have spaciousness in our life, everything is mostly space, right? It's 99 point, there's 11 nines behind the 99. Space, it looks solid to our senses, but meditation helps us to create more spaciousness, which is peace. It's like, do you want peace? Like peace of mind? There's nothing more important. Every day when I ask my soul question, when I meditate, what do I want? It's always peace of mind, because I figure if I have peace of mind, everything must be pretty good.
Oh yeah, totally. That makes so much sense. So writing this book and talking about and sharing with the world all your details of childhood trauma, like how was that experience like? How did that feel to really sit there and write it all out? How was that process like?
Well, as you know, I've done a lot of work and I've been teaching this for 19 years. I really didn't have, I remember the editor I worked with, she said, before our calls, like maybe meditate or do something. After our calls, like she'd give me a list of things to do. I thought, I like scoffed, like, are you kidding, lady? Like, you talking to me? But, oh yeah, it definitely brought up some stuff. And it was painful at times. It was hard. My husband and I never have conflict. And during the book writing process, there were times where I was so spun out. I revisiting things in detail, because memoir is written like a fiction, like, a novel, recounting things and describing sense and, the ambiance of a room, or the sound of my mom's voice, or, what I was internally feeling. I had to go back to that detail. And it was hard at times, but the intent of the book is really to inspire people to say, hey, this woman has grit. She went through a lot and she chose to view it through the lens of being empowered and not disempowered. She chose to do all these things. And it's a memoir, but I do share a little, it's called prescriptive memoir, which means, that I'll show you the cover of the book. Prescriptive memoir, it means like I give sometimes a little prescription, right? Like not often, but a little at the end of a chapter, you'll see like a little box and it'll have, something that pertains to that chapter that maybe the reader could think about or do, because it's not a self-help book yet, it's my story of how I healed. And of course, people are going to go, well, hey, I want to know how to do this work as well.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be so inspiring for many people.
I hope so.
And so tell us a little bit about your emotional healing retreats. Like, who is a good candidate for your retreats, and what do you have an upcoming retreat? How does a retreat look like? Can you just share a little bit?
Yeah. So in 2004, I launched my retreat business. I was a public speaker before that. So I just love being on stage. And that's kind of like, even from childhood, just it's always been my thing. And I thought, I want to help people in that kind of environment. And back when I started 19 years ago, there actually weren't a lot of retreats. It was kind of a new thing, just getting started. And at first, I only worked with women. It was called A Woman's Journey to Wholeness, and it's morphed now. It's men and women. We usually have about 15% men, although our last California retreat, it was all women. My husband co-leads with me, and my daughter, she teaches yoga. And we do private and public and group retreats. And so the emotional healing system, of course, is foundation is meditation. somebody who's in crisis, Anya, would not be an ideal fit, because when we're in crisis, we're in stress response, right? And we can't really take on and learn, and we're too worried. We're wanting to put a fire out. We're telling ourselves a story. And when you're in crisis mode, you can't be in a state of, learning. So, if somebody's, just lost someone, a death or something, that wouldn't be ideal. I know it seems like it would because it's emotional healing, but they'd have to kind of be out of the crisis before this would be an ideal fit. But someone who's open, who's spiritual, who isn't real religious, who isn't attached to a lot of dogma and doctrine. I always say that your beliefs are creating your reality. And if they were working for you, you probably wouldn't be feeling what you're feeling. So it's time to maybe re-examine and upgrade the belief system, right? But the retreats, we have one coming up in September in Florida. It's 5 days. It's a Monday through a Friday. And it's it's really transformational processes. It's learning and then learning how to go through the process of what we're teaching you. So it's, did I answer that?
Yeah, you definitely did. Interesting, because it's called Emotional Healing Retreat, but it makes so much sense what you said about someone who is in crisis. They wouldn't be in the right place to take it. And as I know personally, it's a lot of work. Like, it's not sitting there and listening to you teach. Like, we have to go deep and do the work. So you really have to be.
Yeah, there's hypnotherapy processes. And of course, in a traditional way, when I'm working one-on-one, I'm taking the notes for the client when I guide them through hypnotherapy. In this, they have to do it themselves. And so, that can be a little challenging for people. However, it's how I was trained. You've done the process twice, it works.
It definitely does. Yeah.
You just have to be, you have to really want it. And so let's face it, a lot of people are attached to their victim stories, right? They're looking for the quick fix.
So true. You have to want it and be willing to really do the work and not
exactly.
And be consistent, because the meditation, that's the key to really be consistent and do it every day, and not like, oh, I fell off the wagon, I'm going to do it again next month.
It is, because as you go through your day, if you're not meditating, you don't have that witnessing awareness, that self-awareness, so that when the stinking thinking comes in, you just you run away with it. But a meditator, you catch yourself as you meditate. Oh, I'm lost in thought, come back. I'm lost in thought, come back. You keep building that muscle. Now, all of a sudden, I go through my day, I'm driving my car, I'm doing mundane activities, I'm having a conversation, and I'll catch when I'm not present.
Yes.
And that is our life. Our life is happening in this present moment. If we can't be present for it, then we're lost, literally.
Yes. So give us the insight on when is the book release date? I think it's coming up soon in July, right?
It is on my grandson's birthday, July 12th.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I wanted to do it to honor him. July 12th. We also have, I haven't shared this with you. I haven't really shared this with many people. We're in the works for the second book, which is the Emotional Healing System, a practical guidebook to, healing. And we haven't completely done the title yet, but we have hired someone, an editor who's working with Lance and I, my husband, who's a physician, him. He'll be co-authoring the book with me. So we're excited, and it'll be out at the end of the year. So we're just going to kind of bang them both out.
You're going to be helping even more people. That's so beautiful. Yeah. And Jana, share where's the best place for people to find you?
The book. Okay. So the release, you can get the book on Amazon, on all platforms, but it'll be available in hardcover, paperback, ebook. And then I'm in the studio in a couple of weeks doing the Audible. So that'll be there, but you can find
me. You're going to be reading it yourself?
I am.
Oh, I love that. It's so different when you read it yourself. Yeah.
I think so too. I can't hire somebody to read. It's so personal, right? Yeah. I just hope I can get through it and never be emotional.
Well, yeah, sure you can.
Yeah.
You're so professional.
Yeah, and janawilson.com is the book website with all the info. And then you can also find me at emotionalhealingretreats.com if you're interested in learning how to meditate. I also teach people you don't have to come to a retreat. We are launching this Friday, the 9th, an online retreat. So for people who can't make a live event, it'll be available. It's a Kajabi online course. You have unlimited access to it. So we're really trying to figure out ways to help people and meet them where they are, because not everybody can jump on a plane and fly to California or Florida or Santa Fe and make it accessible.
Beautiful. I really appreciate you coming on here today. I know you're a really busy lady. You have a lot going on right now. So I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, I love you. Thank you for having me.